Pick up your guns and grab some ammo, cause today we're talking about shooters. Greetings gamers, welcome to Gaming Crash Course, where we talk about obvious concepts from video games using our own unique interpretations. If this is your first time visiting our channel though, you should totally check out our first video. It's all about RPGs, so you won't be seeing any guns there, unlike in this video where we'll go all out, guns blazing, sweat dripping with manly pheromones filling the air. Guns and explosions will be everywhere, except that this is a Gaming Crash Course episode and not a Michael Bay film. Today, we will be analyzing the prominent elements that identify shooters as its own type of genre. So like in last week's RPG video, we must look at similarities between shooter games. That was odd. All those games. Were those really games? Or was that just one game? Looking at this, we can immediately point out the heavy resemblance of shooter video games with each other, particularly first-person shooter video games. So this actually makes our job easier here. We no longer have to look for variants found in one element of a shooter video game. Besides Battlefield, Crysis, Medal of Honor, Killzone, and of course the infamous Call of Duty series, COD. COD never changes. Anyway, besides these games, the story element and settings of many shooters seem to be substantially varied, though the war themes are usually present. Still, it is fine to ignore the presence of this fact given the actual variance of settings found in shooters. Same goes with progression systems, where actual character improvement can usually only be seen by the constantly improving gun variety made available to players as they play, and not a core mechanic found in shooters. So going back to our shooter montage, I've said that the similarities of these games make it easier to identify an element unique to shooters. Well, look at it again. Do you see it? I mean seriously, if you haven't noticed it at this point, which by the way should be very obvious, I'm guessing you've never played a shooter video game before. Ah, how sad. Well, at least you can still be amazed with Call of Duty. They're making another one this year, so kudos, I guess. Sarcasm aside, it's the shooting! The shooting! This basic shooting combat mechanic makes a shooter. So what then? Episode done? Ha! You wish! We're just getting started. The shooting combat mechanic can't simply be summarized with such guns, much boom, wow. Instead, we have to look at the stages that govern how a combat mechanic can qualify as a shooter. Well then, let's begin. Let me ask you guys a question. What do you think is the first step in shooting a gun besides picking it up? Obviously, you don't pull the trigger right away. That would cause different kinds of accidents apparently. Instead, what you have to initially do, which is the most crucial stage of shooting a gun, is to aim. Aiming basically means to point your weapon at the baddies. Games accomplish this by providing an aiming reticle to the player's monitor, those usually white crosshairs at the center of your screen. Yeah, that one. This system helps a player determine the trajectory of their bullets to a certain degree. You see, some shooters implement an expanding reticle as opposed to the static ones. Expanding reticles show a player the coverage area where their bullets will land. It's not just one point in the game world but a whole slab of space where a bullet will surely hit. The reticle size and reticle expansion rate depends on the type of weapon, but usually gets bigger when a gun is constantly being fired, when a player is moving, or when a player is moving and shooting. The reticle can be shrinked as well, usually by crouching or shooting behind cover. Now, after a well-situated aim, the player has to shoot. Press a button on your controller or keyboard and the gun shoots bullets. Simple as that. After firing all available bullets in your gun's magazine, reloading happens. Reloading is a short animation time that triggers automatically when all bullets have been used up or manually through the push of a button. Reloading leaves a character defenseless to damage since the gun becomes unavailable for counter-attacking, though all bullets in the magazine are instantly refilled. Some games implement a recharge mechanic in place of a reloading mechanic to enforce control on the firing rate of players. Firing non-stop would disable a gun for a few seconds, similar to running out of ammo and reloading. And that's basically the whole shooting mechanic found in shooters. But there's still more we can talk about other than just the combat mechanic of these games. One crucial element that we've been outright ignoring is the type of weapon. So what types of weapons can we find in shooters? Well, a lot actually. I think that there are some staple ones though, but the topic of weapons is much too wide to be discussed in this video. Instead, let's go macro. Yeah, there are a lot of guns, we all love guns, but shooters aren't only just about guns. Remember, weapons in shooters are not exclusively guns but instead are projectiles, so any projectile weapon will do as long as the combat mechanic is the same to what we have already established: aim and shoot. Are you getting where this is going? What if there was a game that played out like a shooter except it didn't have guns? Would that game be considered a shooter? The answer would be a resounding yes. And luckily, there is a game like that. Gamers, I present to you Link's Crossbow Training for the Wii without the U. This is a spin-off game from the Legend of Zelda series which was inspired by the bow mechanic used in Twilight Princess. In TP, the bow and other ranged items were aimed using the motion controls of the Wiimote. Basically, you have to physically aim at the sensor attached to your TV in order to simulate realistic manual aiming. And from that, crossbow training was born. And yes, before you even ask, the game equips you solely with a crossbow. It's pretty much like Call of Duty except that you're controlling Link and you're using a bow instead of giant boomsticks of manhood. So yeah. Oh, and you can't insult your enemy's moms because there wasn't multiplayer and therefore no voice chat. Where have we heard all that before? Nintendo. Now getting back on topic, given the weapon non-variety of Link's crossbow training, it is still considered a shooter because the featured weapon is a projectile, and aiming and shooting are major gameplay mechanics. But wait, there's still more to discuss, which are thankfully pretty easy to explain. First is the earliest known variant of shooters, the shoot 'em up games. Remember playing Virtua Cop on computers or maybe Time Crisis on arcades? Yep, the older ones that aren't Call of Duty. The definition of shoot 'em ups have been highly discussed by critics many times in the past because a lot of games can easily be classified into this genre, though I would say that the shoot 'em ups are typically those games that aren't modern shooters. There are a lot of variants for the shoot 'em up genre given this light, some of which are rail shooters like Time Crisis and House of the Dead allow players to shoot incoming enemies on screen, usually with light gun controllers, and doesn't give the player any manual option of movement. Motion is scripted to the game's events. Scrolling shooters like Sonic Wings, on the other hand, allow players manual free movement in a fixed area, usually in one screen as it moves horizontally, vertically, or both. Games like Contra are called run and gun games, which are basically like platformer games that have shooting mechanics. Now on to modern genres, and you know it's coming. First-person shooters, or FPS, are shooters that allow the player to play the game through the avatar's eyes. It's like being in real life, except it's in video games. Doom is considered the pioneer of the genre due to it having the first elements that constitute an FPS. First-person shooters typically have better aiming mechanics given that players can see closer in the environment than other shooter genres, allowing better reflexes to kick in during combat. The better aiming mechanic has allowed FPS to become the most multiplayer-focused and competitive shooting genre. Games like Call of Duty and Battlefield don't lie. Thus, FPS are considered to be the shooter genre that emphasizes the most player skill through quick reflexes of the player. TPS or third-person shooters, however, are different. TPS games let you control an avatar through the eyes of the environment. The presence of a character on screen actually reduces the amount of things that can be seen by the player. This led to the creation of the over-the-shoulder perspective from Resident Evil 4 to focus combat at the center and one side of the screen, making it easier to see the environment. TPS games also have a more pronounced cover system, or the tactic of getting behind objects to avoid enemy fire, compared to FPS. This makes combat a lot easier and less brutal compared to, you guessed it, FPS games. Basically, TPS focus more on looking cool and playing things out like a movie, in contrast to FPS that emphasize combat reflexes. Finally, there are the tactical shooters. Tactical shooters may take the form of an FPS or TPS but is differentiated due to its focus on tactical play. Unlike using your quick reflexes in FPS, tactical shooters promote caution since the mechanics of these games are considered realistic, especially the damage threshold of characters dying from one or two well-placed bullets. The Rainbow Six series are tactical shooters that revolutionized this genre for introducing its core elements of tactics and realism. So there you have it, shooters. Unlike our first video, I think I can confidently claim that the elements of shooters here are pretty spot on. Shooters are games that allow us to aim and shoot using projectile weapons like guns or bows to take down hordes of enemies. So whether you play Call of Duty or not, all shooters are pretty much the same thing, aim and shoot. I actually mean that in a good way, by the way. And that concludes our gaming crash course. Learn hard, game harder. Dismissed. Wow, assuming you've already watched our RPG episode, then you've just finished another crash course. And if you want more, then just tell us what you think in the comments below and subscribe to get updates on our videos. With that, see you next time.